Egypt is often described as eternal, a civilization that mastered time by building against it, stone temples, fixed rituals, a calendar that outlived dynasties. Because of this, influence is usually assumed to match endurance. If something lasts long enough, it must still matter. If authority survives, it must still shape events. But history rarely works that cleanly. Egypt did not lose influence in a moment of defeat. It did not disappear behind smoke or ruin. It remained visible, functional, and intact long after its voice carried less weight. This is the quiet contradiction at the center of Egypt's story, a power that endured, yet slowly stopped directing outcomes. A state that remained sovereign, yet increasingly peripheral. Influence does not always collapse. Sometimes it thins, sometimes it withdraws without resistance. And when that happens, the loss is difficult to recognize from within. For much of its history, Egypt was not merely a kingdom among others. It was a reference structure. Its authority was embedded in trade, diplomacy, and legitimacy across the Eastern Mediterranean. Egypt's power rested on coherence. The pharaoh embodied divine order. Institutions reinforced continuity. Administrative systems prioritized predictability over innovation. This arrangement produced extraordinary stability. Dynasties fell, but the system absorbed them. Borders shifted, but the structure endured. From the outside, Egypt appeared immovable. The period this inquiry turns toward is not Egypt's origin, nor its dramatic endpoints. It is the long middle. The centuries when Egypt still ruled itself, still commanded resources, still spoke in the language of authority, yet no longer organized the region's future. This shift did not occur in isolation. It unfolded alongside changes elsewhere. New political centers emerged beyond the Nile Valley. Trade networks expanded. Military practices evolved unevenly. Egypt remained aware of these changes. It documented them. It corresponded with foreign courts. It sent envoys and armies when required. Nothing was ignored. Yet, something subtle changed in how Egypt related to these pressures. Response replaced initiative. Maintenance replaced reconfiguration. This was not negligence. It was structural. Egypt's legitimacy was ancient. It derived strength from continuity rather than disruption. Power was preserved by aligning the present with the past. The system rewarded repetition. It trusted precedent. It viewed deviation as a threat to order. For centuries, this restraint functioned as strength. It prevented fragmentation. It stabilized succession. It sustained belief. But influence does not reward restraint in the same way. As surrounding states adjusted their institutions to new conditions, Egypt reinforced its existing ones. As others reorganized authority, Egypt refined ritual. The result was not immediate weakness, it was delay. Egyptian campaigns still succeeded, diplomacy still functioned, tribute still arrived. But the rhythm of response slowed. Decision-making became cautious. Adaptation occurred only when pressure could no longer be absorbed internally. Influence requires more than legitimacy. It requires shaping the choices of others before force becomes necessary. Gradually, that shaping power diminished. Foreign rulers still addressed the pharaoh with honorifics. Letters preserved the language of hierarchy. Egypt's prestige remained intact on the surface. Yet the content of those communications changed. Requests became demands. Appeals became complaints. Egypt was no longer assumed to be the organizing authority. It had to reassert that position repeatedly. This distinction matters because authority that must constantly reaffirm itself has already shifted. Egypt did not lose territory first. It lost momentum. The administrative system remained precise, but inflexible. The military remained disciplined, but increasingly defensive. Egypt still thought of itself as central. Others no longer did. Over time, new powers emerged that were less stable but more adaptive. They restructured leadership. They reorganized military command. They adjusted quickly to new technologies and alliances. Egypt watched these developments through the lens of continuity. Change was evaluated against what had always worked. This produced a consistent pattern. Threats were addressed individually, not structurally. Solutions preserved the system rather than revising it. The center held, but it did not expand. An empire can survive without influence, but it cannot lead. Egypt's authority remained real within its borders. Outside them, it became conditional. Trade continued, but routes diversified. Diplomacy persisted, but loyalty fragmented. Egypt was still respected. It was no longer decisive. This erosion is difficult to observe because it leaves few dramatic markers. There is no single event to point to, no decisive battle. What changes instead is expectation. Other states begin to act without reference to Egypt. Alliances form that do not require its approval. Conflicts resolve themselves elsewhere. Egypt becomes a participant rather than an arbiter. The system continued to function internally. Taxation worked. Agriculture produced surplus. Religious institutions reinforced order. From inside the structure, there was little evidence of loss. That is the danger of long stability. It masks external displacement. By the time foreign administrators entered Egypt generations later, they encountered a society that still worked. The transition did not require destruction. Egypt was governed through its own institutions. Its coherence made it governable by others. This is the quiet paradox. The same stability that preserved Egypt also made its authority transferable. Power that adapts poorly can still endure. It simply becomes available. Egypt's symbols remained powerful. Its rituals continued. Its calendar still marked time. But influence had already relocated. The shift was not ideological. It was structural. Egypt continued to believe in its permanence. Others began to treat it as a legacy system. Prestige endured without initiative. Legitimacy survived without leadership. Eventually, Egypt mattered more to history than to strategy. This pattern does not belong to antiquity alone. Long-standing systems often confuse survival with command. They assume continuity guarantees relevance. Institutions reward what preserves them. They resist what might destabilize order, even if adaptation is required. The longer a system succeeds, the harder it becomes to revise. Change threatens coherence. Coherence is mistaken for strength. Egypt faced this threshold repeatedly. Each time it chose preservation. That choice maintained identity. It also narrowed influence. By the time the cost was visible, altering the system would have risked collapse. So continuity prevailed again. Egypt remained. Others moved. The fracture appears when this history turns inward. Because the unresolved question Egypt leaves behind is not about conquest. It is about recognition. How does a system know when its authority has stopped shaping outcomes? What signals indicate that influence has shifted elsewhere, even while control remains? And how often does power mistake quiet endurance for continued command? Egypt's story suggests that the most dangerous moment for authority is not crisis, but comfort. When rituals still function, when institutions still operate, when symbols still command respect, that is when influence can quietly slip away. Egypt did not fall. It persisted. And in persisting without reconfiguration, it allowed history to reorganize around it. The monuments remain. The name endures. What vanished was the invisible force that once made others wait, adjust, and align. Influence does not announce its departure. It simply stops arriving. And by the time that absence is felt, it has already become normal. If this story gave you something to think about, consider subscribing to Timeless Questions. We explore history, philosophy, and the patterns that quietly guide human behavior.